Good morning, everybody. Award-winning author and rural policy expert Brian Reisinger is our very special guest today, Tuesday, November 4th, 2025. I'm your host, Ben Dryden, and you're watching DrydenWire Live, presented by Northwoods Policy Network. Folks, there's something new coming to the Northwoods this fall, and it's called the Northwoods Policy Network. NPN is the premier Northwoods first policy and advocacy organization. They exist not only to educate and offer real solutions for a stronger future, but to make sure those solutions are heard by decision makers. To watch their full launch video and stay connected, visit northwoodspolicy.org. With that, we welcome back to the show for the fourth time. Joining us, our very good friend, award-winning author and real policy expert, Brian Reisinger. Reisinger, good morning. Welcome back.
Hey, man, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I know. Yeah, you were first on, I think, we've known each other for a long time. But I think summer of 2023, then you were on, I think, around Christmas time that year. And then just last year, you were on after you wrote a book. And that went like huge. Man, how is that going? Land rich, cash poor. How's the
Well,
book sales
thank you. I
going?
appreciate it. It's rarefied air to be a repeat of any kind on DrydenWire. I didn't know that it was that rare. So it's an honor.
Yeah.
Book has been doing great. It's been, for me, being a farm boy from, the southern part of the state, a little ways south of you guys, but Southwest Wisconsin has, I think, a lot in common with the Northwoods. I never knew if I'd ever get the chance to write a book of any kind, let alone one that was so deeply about my roots and not only farming in Wisconsin, but what's been happening to our disparate farms across the country. And then for the book to do well is honestly a bonus and a blessing, right? I mean, it's to tell the story was the meaningful thing, and for people to want to pick it up and for me to get the chance to talk about it across the country is just an honor from there.
How much work, after you write a book, how much work do you have to put in after you write it? Because I think it's it's almost like a campaign where you put in all this work and it's like one part of the job is just running and everything that goes with a campaign. And then you get the job. And then it's like, okay, now you still have to do the work, but it's a different kind of a job now. So obviously you have to write the book and then get it published. But then it doesn't stop. You just don't go, okay, now I'm just going to sit and wait and watch the money come in. How much work goes into the after the book is published?
Yeah, that's right. I went on a podcast where a national author said that you write the book and then it takes 2 to 3 times as much to promote it, and that's about right. I keep busy. I got my day job in our consulting work, and I help out on the farm on the side, on the business side, and trying to pitch in on solutions for our farmers. We chart out the future, and they throw me in a tractor on my supposed days off, and on the side of all that, I'm working to keep the book going out there, and it's a lot of work, but it's joyful work. I mean, I'm grateful for the chance to spread the story. So we spend a lot of time talking to media across the country. We spend a lot of time planning events. Spend a lot of time doing things to make sure it's getting in the hands of people who are going to care about it. And so it's busy. It's a lot of work, but I'm grateful again to be able to tell the story.
Let's actually back up here. This is your fourth time on, but maybe people don't know that much about you. Maybe this is the first time they've seen you. Give us a quick bio on how you got to where you are right now.
Yeah, well, I was the classic misfit farm boy, to put it really bluntly. I grew up on my dad's farm. We were a 50 cow dairy farm in Sauk County, Southwest Wisconsin. And, growing up, I didn't have the talent for cattle and crops that he did. I love my roots. I love where I was from. But I was struggling with the idea of, am I going to be a failing farmer or am I going to be something else? Because I knew I wasn't any good at it, on top of how hard of a life it was. So I pursued a writing career off the farm, went to school in Eau Claire, and then wrote for Wausau, Daily Herald, and
Yeah.
down in Janesville and all over the place. And after 10 years in journalism, I got into public policy. I worked on Capitol Hill. And then I came home and I got the chance to work on public policy in Wisconsin, and did that for a number of years. And for the last several years, nearly a decade now, I've been doing consulting on nonpartisan, private sector, bipartisan issues, working on messaging for our clients, and then also working on my own writing. And it was just in the past couple of years here where, after years of trying to get a book published, I finally got a little bit of attention from a publisher, and got the chance to do that. And now, of all the twists and turns, I split my time between the family farm there in Wisconsin And of all places, Northern California, a place that a farm boy never expected to find himself. My wife's from Northern California, and she works for radio out here. So it was just being her family. So since my work and writing can be from anywhere, I go back and forth between the Sacramento area and the family farm, where we're still trying to chart the future of where our farm's going to go, as my dad continues farming, and as actually my sister works to take it over. So we're still living out the story.
And so Land Rich Cash Poor, I if I recall, I didn't read the book because you're the first one that told me that you could listen to the book. So I'm like, I'm not going to read a book because I'm stupid. But I listened to it, and it was great because you were the actual, you were the one that was actually narrating the book. It wasn't like AI or somebody else. So it was really bizarre because I've known you for so long. That was crazy. Uh, um,
Yeah, I thought they kind of screwed that up. I thought they maybe should have done like Morgan Freeman or Robert Duvall, or that
right.
probably wasn't in the budget, But it's interesting though. In seriousness, they go through this process of figuring out who should voice it, and they do voice actors for books of all kinds, and they're not all famous actors; they're just professionals. And the reason they asked me to do it, they said, is because of what a personal story it was. So I got in there. I was kind of intimidated, sitting in a studio with a microphone like that, and all kinds of fancy equipment around, and it was something I'd never done before. And they told me just lean into the emotion, read it like you wrote it, And so it was honestly kind of a emotional experience because we tell a lot of stories of tragic accidents and addiction and economic upheaval, different challenges my family has faced over the decades since the Depression onward, and how that connects with all these issues that have been wiping out our farms. And so it's an emotional book for me. It's emotional writing it, and they told me just lean into that. And so if my voice cracked up at something, they kept that in. And I don't know. They said that the emotion is better to have in there because people know that it's a real and honest story that way. So
Yeah.
maybe we
Uh,
got honesty points, if not professional voice points.
yeah. Casey says the audio book is a must listen. Appreciated you sharing your raw story because it was. I remember Adam Jarko read it, and I think he even posted something on Facebook after he read it, and it was just like, man, what it was. It was a very emotional. He had cried several times through reading the book. Farmers. Right now, first of all, a farmer. This is like it has to be the one nonpartisan issue, right? I mean, it's farmers. Everybody yay, Democrats, Republicans, everyone loves farmers. First of all, is that true? Because I would assume
Yeah.
that it is.
Yeah, it's mostly true. Mostly true. I appreciate what Adam said, and so many others. Whether it's good, solid conservative stalwarts like him, or whether it's people who might have voted for a blue collar Democrat at one time, or whether it's just people who care about where their food comes from, regardless of what their politics are. I have found that the farm issue cuts across all boundaries.
Yeah.
It's truly a nonpartisan issue. Doesn't mean it doesn't get pulled into politics, and it doesn't mean that people on the left or the right don't have different opinions about farmers or different things. But as far as caring about our farms and caring about the way that affects our food, once you make that connection for people, I've found that people of all different political backgrounds, all different parts of the country, all different walks of life care about it. It's not, enough to solve the problem yet. We need to tell the story, and we need to get people united around what to do. But people do care about farmers, and I have found that people don't necessarily take it through the political lens, which I think is good because you can talk to people about a real and honest story, and then from there we can identify the problems and we can talk about some of the solutions. That's the way to get something done about it, rather than trying to start out with a political argument, whatever the political argument is. So that's what I want to do with the book. I decided I'm going to let the facts take me where they may, and I have found that the people who care about this issue, it's the same way.
What are the problems? I mean, there's
Yeah,
probably like a whole bunch of
base
them. How about like a top three or just three?
Yeah, totally. Actually, I'm glad you said top three because it breaks down to three neat buckets. There's a million
Oh,
problems, but they break down into three buckets. So the first is economic crises that we didn't understand how they uniquely affected the farm, whether it's the Depression, the farm crisis in the 1980s that a lot of people in your listenership also lived through, whether it was COVID. These economic crises that hit our farms in unique ways, and we don't understand how it's affecting the farms, and therefore we don't know how it runs through our entire economy and affects our food supply. Second one is governmental decisions, and I'm honest with people about the fact that it's governmental decisions by both parties. The establishment of the Republican Party as well as the Democrats at different points over the decades have done things that made the problem worse, and in many cases I would say didn't really fit with their principles either. There's all kinds of Faustian deals and tough trade-offs that are made in farm policy that I don't think we need to make. And people can be true to their politics and find a way for us to find some bipartisan solutions is what I found as I was investigating this. And then the third big area is technological change. And technology is a double-edged sword. It's good because it moves agriculture forward. It means that we can feed more people with fewer people breaking their backs to do it. But it went so far, and we lost track of making sure that technology was the kind that could be used and afforded on medium and small farms as well as large farms. So a lot of our technology is leaving small farms like we have in Wisconsin behind. So those economic crises, those governmental policies, and those technological forces have all kind of combined over and over, decade after decade. And we've been losing 45,000 farms a year for the past century. And I did a little extra math on this. If we keep losing farms going forward at the same rate that we have in the past, we will lose the rest of our farms in 40 years. I'm 40 now. By the time my little baby girl is my age, we'll lose the rest of the farms in this country if we don't do something to change the pace of loss that's been going on.
Now, when you say farms, are you talking like corporate farms? Are you talking family farms? Because we can't just not have farming, right? That produces our food.
Yep. Well, in that number, in that statistic, I'm including all farms. The reality of how it'll shake out is that we'll just have a few big farms left. The loss of 45,000 a year, if we did that going forward, that would mathematically wipe out all of our farms. But we won't literally lose all the farms.
Yeah.
What we'll lose is any remainder of small, medium farms. We'll only have large farms. And not only that, we won't even have large farms. We'll only have gigantic farms. And, look, there's been this relentless push of get bigger, get out. And people who believe in a market economy understand that consolidation and, one farmer buying another, that's a natural market force. But those economic and governmental and technological forces have made it an unnatural market force where we're forcing farms to get bigger. The farms that are getting bigger don't necessarily want to do that, but it's the only way they can make it. And we're forcing them to do that, or we're forcing them to get out. And so what will happen is we'll have, farming end up being too big to fail. Think about banks. Think about what happened in the Great Recession when we had these banks that were so big that if they went down, they'd take us down. That's the way farms will be. And there's something we can do about it. There's still a lot of farms of large, medium, and small size out there, different types. The overwhelming majority of our family operations, but we're losing them every year.
Well, when we talked about this in your book, and we talked about farms, and I think you came on that a few months after, or before that, we were doing our 10 myths about rural Wisconsin. I thought that was a fun show.
It was.
But since the last time you were on, things have changed. Tariffs. And this is not a political question. It's not. It's soybean farmers. I mean, I think it was like October 30th. It was November, like a week ago. President Trump met with the China, whatever his name is. I can't remember how you say his name. And to work out something for a soybean thing. And I think they agreed to buy like, I don't know how many, like 15 million or something metric tons by January 1st, and guaranteed at least 25 or 26 million for the next 3 years, every single year, because that was a really big concern for a lot of farmers. And that's all happened since you and I last talked. Were you concerned about it at that point when that stuff was happening? You're like, oh my goodness. And again, this isn't a I like Trump or I don't like Trump. That's nothing to do with it. It's just simply a, oh my goodness, this is. Were you really concerned when those tariffs were coming in and when China was saying that's it? Because they bought like half of the soybeans supply from America, and now they're going to Brazil and went everywhere else. How concerned were you when you saw that?
Yeah, the honest answer is that farmers are caught between cross-cutting winds. And so, China snubbing us on soybeans does have an impact, but so do unfair trade practices. So the reality for farmers is going back to the 90s, there have been unfair trade practices, free trade deals that have been ripping farmers off, as well as our workers and others, for decades. And what it means is it opened up more markets, which is a good thing, but it also meant that there were markets with people that weren't being fair with us and that were doing things to drive prices down also, like China. China will buy up a whole bunch of American agriculture products, and then they'll dump those products to push the price down. And that's on top of the cheating on currency manipulation and cheating on trade standards that they do. So the reality is that China is a big buyer, but also screws with the American farmer relentlessly. And so that's why farmers have traditionally supported getting tougher and said, hey, we need tougher negotiations. If we need to use tariffs to do that, let's do that. And they say that while hoping that we can do that to bring China to the table, have a tougher negotiation, a more fair trade deal, and not, end up having a trade dispute where China snubs us. And so both is true. Farmers want us to get tougher on trade, and farmers also want to make sure that when we're doing that, we're opening markets. So the trade deal with China was a step forward where they're going to be buying the kind of soybeans levels that they have in previous years. And hopefully, because it's been tougher negotiations along the way, we can land it in a way that is less unfair to our farmers and our workers. But in the meantime, there was definitely short-term pain, and there were a lot of farmers who, they knew that this was going to be the case, but they had to sell their soybeans before that deal was made, because when soybeans are harvested, you got to do it at a certain moisture level, right? And so, like for example, our farm, we grow traditional crops, soybeans, corn, stuff like that. But we're also raising, beef for consumers. We're also raising pasture-raised chickens. We're doing things to try to get into the new food economy. So we're transitioning from that traditional farm into a diversified farm. But we still have to grow soybeans on some level because it's what we have the equipment to do. There's some income there. It's just not enough. And so, a lot of farms end up having to sell their soybeans before that trade deal was struck just because of the way the weather was going. So there was definitely pain there. And I think there's also a hope that maybe that pain can lead to China doing, a finalized agreement on this deal that can mean more fair trade practices in the future. There's not an easy answer for our farmers, is the honest truth, in either direction.
Now, when you drive around, because you spend your time now between Wisconsin and in California, do you see a lot of essentially solar farms, and are you concerned about that?
That's an issue that's out there that farmers have been working through dealing with. My view of that, and I've done some work on rural development issues and stuff, and I'll just say that my view of what a farmer does with their land, whether they do solar on it or any other thing on it, is kind of their choice. The deeper dilemma that I see is, we talk about the land rich, cash poor dilemma. And the land rich part is right, that the property values of the land is going up, up, up. And the cash poor part is that you can't hardly afford to make a living on the land farming. The deeper problem there is not the land rich part. It isn't bad for farmers to have land that's worth something. It allows them to take out a loan at the bank. It allows them to have equity to be able to afford their business when things are tough year after year. The problem is the cash poor part. The problem is that there isn't new entrepreneur opportunity out there for our farmers. And so the reality is that, we can talk about what they should or shouldn't be doing with their land, but they wouldn't be in tough dilemmas making hard choices about what to do if they had new entrepreneurial opportunity in this country. And there's things we can do to create that opportunity. That's the real problem.
When you say new entrepreneurship, what do you mean by that? Because when I hear that, I think so. A lot of people, especially in our area, myself included, my brother, we grew up here. We grew up surrounded by farms, 4 miles out of a small town of 1,200 people. We loved it here, but then when we graduated, we moved away. We go to the cities, we go to Eau Claire, we go to other places, and then we always end up coming back. Not always, but we ended up coming back to because we loved it up here. This is where you want to raise a family. It's rural Wisconsin, and it's the Northwoods. This is like the greatest place on the planet. So we want to do that. But when I came back, I started DrydenWire. When my brother came back, he started his businesses. When you said the entrepreneurial part of it, does that tie into the how many people move back home and say, you know what I want to do? I want to start a farm. Like, does anybody start a farm anymore? And is that even a thing? Or because isn't this kind of passed down for family farm generation to generation, and that's what they do? But who goes just decides I'm going to start a farm?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, part of it is solving these economic dilemmas so that the families that own the land that are selling it from the parent generation to the successor generation can afford to do it. That's one of the problems, is that we've got a lot of farms that are existing family businesses, existing small businesses, but there isn't new entrepreneur opportunity for them. And so it gets harder and harder as the older farmer ages and the younger kids are going off to do something else, because you don't have a lot of people in high school guidance counselors telling kids to go farm, to your exact point. So part of it is solving that issue, having the entrepreneurial opportunity for the farms to pass through the generations in an economical way. The second part of it is there actually are people who want to start farms. You never hear about it because it's so hard to do. There's this massive amount of farms on the one hand that are owned by the owner generation that's aging out gradually. They're in their 60s, they're in their 70s. Some people are farming in their 80s. And then you got on the other side of this, you got young families that would love to get into farming, but they don't have access to land. So you have these two groups of people that if we could figure out a way to make farming more economical with new entrepreneur opportunity would mean that the existing family businesses that have a chance to pass from one generation to the next, that younger generation can actually afford to buy the farm. And then also for those farm families that don't have someone that's taken over the farm, they can turn and sell it in an economical way to someone else who wants to farm it. And if we don't do that, if we don't find a way for the next generation of existing farm families and a new generation of additional farm families to be able to make it with new entrepreneur opportunity, the reality is that our farms are going to continue to sell. The farmers are going to have to sell their land for all kinds of different uses, and that's what's been going on for decades.
Oh. Immigration. So I put this into Chat GPT, so I don't have no idea how accurate. No, it wasn't even Chat GPT. It was a AI, just on like a web browser. You ask a question and it'll answer it through AI. I put this in this morning, and I can't remember the actual question that I asked. I think it was just about immigration, Wisconsin, Governor Evers, because I remember him saying things about this. And this is what it spit out. It said, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers has consistently voiced concern about the potential impact of mass deportation and undocumented immigrants on the state's agricultural sector, particularly its dairy farms. An estimated 70%, and again, please don't quote me on this, this is like Wikipedia, right? Like you don't really know. An estimated 70% of the workforce on Wisconsin dairy farms consists of immigrants, mostly undocumented, who are essential to the industry's operation. Is that even close to being true, the percentage-wise? And are those immigrants and undocumented or illegal immigrants, is that also true? I mean, if it's 70% are immigrants and most are undocumented, we'll just, for argument's sake, we'll just say 50%. Is that for small farms, family farms, or are we talking the big farms? And how much of an impact is that?
Yeah. Well, I can't do battle with AI without doing a deeper investigation, but I can tell you that according to the USDA, it is about half of our farm labor that's immigrant labor, and they believe that the lion's share of that is folks who don't have a legal status to be in the country. Yeah. And so this is another issue where farmers are caught in between cross-cutting political winds. I mean, the reality is that, farmers, look, President Trump and people who want to secure the border got a lot of support from rural communities, farm country, and they got a lot of it from farmers, and they get it for various reasons. But one of them is that there are a lot of farmers that want to, make sure we secure the border. It's also true. A lot of farms do employ immigrant labor. They have to, because there aren't people who are coming to take those jobs. And I guess I'll say this. It tends to trend toward larger farms. There are farms of all sizes. Our farm was pretty small. We didn't have any immigrant labor. My dad would have an occasional hired hand from a family friend or something like that. But there were farms that weren't too much bigger than us that did have immigrant labor. And, look, the farms are in this position. They want to hire people who are here with, a status that's legal, and they want to have hardworking people who are just trying to, get an economic hand up, and, farms can have affordable labor. That's what they're trying to do. But the fact is that it is so hard to even know whether someone is here with a legal status or not because of the cartels and other stuff. I mean, the cartels don't just, traffic drugs, they traffic people, and they tend to conceal what's going on. And so our farms are in this position where they both want to see a secure border, and, they do in many cases have people that they're employing that are from immigrant families. And here's the reality. The only reason this is a dilemma is because Washington hasn't rolled up its sleeves for decades to get this problem done. Like, why do we have to pick between having a secure border where our country can be safe and our sovereignty can be safe and the law of order can mean something, and then also have, a workforce of hardworking people that want to do it? Why do we have to choose between those two things? Yeah. It's because Washington hasn't solved this for decades. And there's ways to do it. You can secure the border, you can crack down on the cartels, and you can have, farm visa programs like the H-2A working to effectively bring a legal workforce into the country to the degree that it's needed. But it means that politicians need to close their mouths and roll up their sleeves and get something done. And that's a challenging thing these, past couple, 30, 40, 50 years. You know?
Maybe you can answer this because I've never understood it. When it comes to illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants, I'm not sure what the correct terminology is. So I've heard that Americans don't want to do the job. So that's one part of it. The other part I've heard, and I have no idea if any of this stuff is accurate, is that they work for less money. Is to the best of your knowledge, is that true? Is it really just where we're paying you $5 an hour instead of $15 an hour if you're an undocumented because hey, you get to stay in America? Is that a thing? Or is it really just no? Americans don't want to do the job.
Yeah. It's a little bit of both. I can't speak to every farm, but I can tell you this: the farms that I know that have immigrant labor, they actually pay like pretty decently competitive wages. It's
Nice.
it's not like they're able to pay like basement prices compared to what you get for hiring a high school kid down the street.
Sure.
The reality just is that like farm wages aren't that high. Farms can't afford that much. They're small businesses. They're getting wiped out. To the point of our earlier conversation, it's not like it's an area where it's flush with cash, right? So the wages are a little lower than some other industries, but I mean, relatively speaking, I mean, there are certainly, farms out there that are outside the norm, but the farms that I know, they're trying to pay a fair wage to people, whatever their background
Yeah.
is, right? But the issue is, you touch on the economics of it. I'm glad you did, because here's the deeper issue: that relentless push toward get big or get out that we talked about, that's wiping out farms for decades now. That's the same thing that is putting us in this immigration dilemma. In addition to Washington not rolling up its sleeves and figuring out how to secure the border and deal with all this stuff, the reality is that our farms being on this relentless push toward get bigger, get out means fewer and fewer farms, bigger and bigger farms, and lower wages. That's the economic pressure, is just to get bigger and have lower and lower wages. That's not the farmer's choice. That's the situation that our economics put them in, and everybody's facing that squeeze. If we change things, so the new food economy, people who care about making America healthy again, and people from all different walks of life who care about the food they put in their bodies, if we have a new food economy born, the kind of thing that can create the entrepreneur opportunity for our family farms that I'm talking about. Well, now we can have small independent businesses that are growing again with rising wages. That's how you create rising wages. You have small businesses, whether it's farms or others, that are being started, that are growing, that are finding success, that have new opportunity. That's how you create rising wages. If you want to push wages down, hammer an industry where they're losing 45,000 businesses a year and push them to create more and more of something for cheaper and cheaper. And that's how you get these low wages. So we can solve this by solving the deeper issue that our farms are facing as well.
So how do you get that message to the people who make those decisions?
Well, the good news is that there's a lot of people who I think the light bulb is going off. And what I try to say to people is I say, look, if you're from a rural area, and maybe you are from a more Republican or conservative background, you probably have a pretty good view and understanding of what the problems are on the ground. You know what's happening on our farms and in our rural communities. The people who are from urban areas, and they may or may not vote more often for Democrats, et cetera, they know that their food prices are going up. They know that their food is less healthy. They have a fear out there, maybe a vague one, that the food supply is less secure. And all those things are true. So we're all affected by this stuff. So what we need to do is get people from different walks of life focused on this issue so we can solve it. Because the problem we have right now is that half the people understand the problem, and the other half the people are kind of aware of the fact that their food is more expensive and less healthy, but they don't know that it's tied to our farms. And so it's about getting people to make those connections. Because, look, it took, everybody from all different political backgrounds and everywhere in between to screw this up over the decades. And I think the government's involvement has had a big role in that. And so it's going to take, people from all kinds of different walks of life for us to be able to fix this in a way that's lasting, to actually make some big changes, deep changes
Yeah.
that are going to allow farms to move forward in our market economy with new opportunity on the horizon.
How much of an impact has the shutdown had on farmers in America?
It's had a big impact. Look, while there's all this political squabbling going on over whatever the issue is that drove the shutdown, the reality is that farmers have been impacted in a variety of ways. Now, first of all, I got to say that, most farmers I know, they just want to make a buck growing something out of the ground they can sell to someone.
Yeah.
They don't like how much the government is involved in it. Some ways it's a reality. Some ways it's something that they believe can't be helped. But they don't like the way that agriculture and government have been wrapped up with one another. But the reality is that it has an impact. So there are all kinds of local FSA, Farm Service Agency offices that farmers have to go to register their crops and do all kinds of different things and get all kinds of clearances for stuff. And those offices are closed. So that's a challenge. I mean, in some cases it's a big challenge. Some cases it's an inconvenience. But here's the other thing that the shutdown did. It affected the trade dispute. So, again, farmers, they want to just, work hard and make money growing something that people want to buy, right? But the reality is that when you have the tariff situation and you have the government saying, hey, we're going to drive a harder bargain with these countries because we're going to, try to wipe out these unfair trade standards, and farmers say, okay, we're with you. when the government does that and says there could be trade disputes, there could be pain in the short term, it's appropriate in that scenario for some of that tariff revenue that's coming in to go toward folks who are affected by it, right? The government is saying we're going to take this step that's going to cause this economic harm. That tariff revenue coming in, we're going to use that to support some of the farmers that are facing the challenges because of the China snub of soybeans or any other trade dispute. Well, the government shutdown completely halted all that stuff. Now, the Trump administration has been working to release some of the money. They've worked to release about $3 billion of the money that's in categories that they can do on their own without Congress. But they have a much broader package that has much more robust support from that tariff revenue that they wanted to get through and pass. And whether you like, rightward politics or leftward politics or whatever, the idea that this is all getting held up and we're not having this debate because the government is shut down, that's a real problem, because we should be figuring out whether the Trump administration is right to steer some of this tariff revenue toward farms or whether we should have another solution. Whatever the solution ought to be, we're not even talking about it. And meantime, farmers are getting hit by the trade dispute. And, the government is kind of sitting on its hands during the shutdown.
Well, when it comes to the government aspect of it, I think you kind of touched on this. I know, like here in rural northern Wisconsin, we look at some of the issues that we're facing, but it all, as you know very well, it all kind of ties together. Housing is a thing. Well, why is housing such an issue? Well, it all goes back to then look at zoning regulations. It doesn't make it really attractive if we have all these zoning regulations. If you look across zoning ordinances for your counties in Wisconsin, it's ridiculous. Like 80% of that should just be gone. But it makes it more difficult, so therefore it's not very attractive for people to developers to come in and do it. Then you throw in the permitting. You were just kind of touching on that a little bit, not specifically the permitting, but the having to go through this, and sometimes it's 6 months to a year before you get things. So that creates a problem. It's not very attractive for a developer to come in and build. So then we're going to go somewhere else. Well, but you needed that so you can get housing, because you can't have a new business or manufacturing place come in and start a business with 50 to 100 employees. Where are they going to actually live? So we can't do that either. Like, it all kind of ties together, and that's just like the tip of the iceberg, yep. Right? So is that applicable to farms as well, where tie this all together for us?
Yeah, it is. Look, what's happening on our farms affects, as I mentioned, the price of the food, the health of the food, security of food for everybody. But it also affects our communities everywhere in between, from farm country all the way up to the city. And the way that it affects it is our economy in Wisconsin and in a lot of different states across the country, big ag states, but also other states, were built first by the farms. Farming is one of the first economic building blocks that we had. And so when the farms are doing well, then we had small towns sprouting up. And it was true also of logging and other stuff, right? I mean, you guys know about the impact on what's happened with our logging industry, what's happened with our paper industry. But, basically the use of our resources, farming, logging, ranching, fishing if you're out on the coast or by a one of the Great Lakes where you can do some serious fishing. And, all these communities sprouted up because of those natural resource opportunities. And then they grew into towns, and then we had manufacturing and other jobs. Well, here's what's happened since. What's happened since is we began losing our farms at $45,000 a year for the past century. I can tell you that ranches and logging operations and, fishermen, anybody who work with their hands and their back to try to use our resources to feed and build this country. Mining is another one. All these industries have suffered, and what happens is it roars through the rural communities, right? And as that happens and our economy moves from rural to urban, we start having shrinking towns. It's true where I'm from. It's true up in your neck of the woods too. And it just ripples all throughout. And it causes so much economic pain. The hollowing out of rural America is, devastating rural America, but it's also having an impact for everybody else.
Yeah. When we talk to people, and when I listen to people, and it's certainly on social media, which is, always entertaining, pick any topic, like how do we help daycare, because that's a problem right now, daycare in Wisconsin. Well, more money. We want more money. Pick anything. Education needs more money, even though we have declining enrollment, etc. But the answer is always more money. I feel like we need to start reimagining, because what was working before isn't necessarily working now. So let's be innovative and figure out how we can find a way to solve this without that. So what is, from a money standpoint, and again, I wasn't picking on those two, it's just those are two examples of everything, that it's always just more money.
Yep.
What are farmers
Yep.
asking for right now? What does a farmer in Wisconsin say? And I'm assuming it's going to be money in some way, shape, or form. But if not, what is it? What are farmers asking for right now?
Well, farmers, like a lot of people, are forced into sort of this issue of like, well, are you going to take support from a government program, or have nothing? You
You know,
know what I mean? That's kind of the situation there, because there
yep.
isn't this new entrepreneur opportunity. The reality is that deeper reforms can do something better than a new government program can. We've had government programs getting piled one on top of the other for the better part of what would it be, 70 years, more than 70 years. Beyond that, actually, like if you go back to the Depression, which is when it really started in a big way. And we've been piling programs on top of one another. We don't know which ones are working. Don't know which ones are contradictory, and we don't know which ones are prone to favoritism and abuse. And so that's a reason why taxpayers can say, "Where's my money going?" And family farms can say, "Where's that support that was supposed to be out there?"
Yeah.
So the better thing to do is deeper reform. We need an innovation revolution in this country. We need
Yes.
new technology that is moving agriculture forward in a way that moves all of our farms forward. That means getting into something called scale neutral technology, which is to say it's technology that can work and is affordable for small and medium sized farms as well as large farms. Innovation has been leaving our family farms behind for decades. We need to do that. We need to make sure that we're going to have fair markets internationally and domestically, where the little guy, the small business owner, whether they're a farmer or any other kind of mom and pop shop, have a fair shake in our economy. And we need to continue the steps toward a new food economy that our consumers have been taking for a long time. Think about this. We can't all get all of our food from a farmer's market, particularly when it gets cold in the wintertime. It's hard to find fresh produce late November when the snow is on the ground during deer hunting, right?
Yeah.
But we can't do that all the time. But everybody has a way that they can take a step in that direction. When it's seasonally appropriate, stop and buy a farmer's market to get some of your produce in addition to how you usually get it. Go to grocery stores that are willing to carry local goods. A lot of them are willing to carry local goods if they know people will buy it. Buy from the butcher shop down the road. Try to buy half a beef from a farmer down the road. Access all the online marketplaces out there that connect farmers with consumers. If everybody in this country took a half step toward the farmer, we can't all buy our food that way, but if everybody bought some of their food that way, it would revolutionize our food economy. The amount of demand for what family farmers are growing would skyrocket, and they'd be able to make a better living. And a lot of those farms that are stuck growing other traditional row crops where you can't really make a lot of money and you're hostage to foreign countries, those farms can begin growing more food too. So the reality is that this big national supply chain that we had used to supply cheaper food, but it really doesn't anymore. The food is way more expensive. It goes up way faster than the rate of inflation, and it's less healthy and it's less secure. So if we all take a half step toward the family farmer, we can begin to create new entrepreneur opportunity for our farmers, and we can have more choice for our consumers. So if you do all that, if you have the technological innovation, a revolution in American innovation for farms of all sizes, make sure our markets are fair to businesses, small businesses, et cetera, and aren't tilting toward only the big guys. And if we have people moving toward the farmer in terms of the way we buy our food, those are the kinds of things that can change and revolutionize our economy, help farmers find a way forward, and get more healthy, affordable food on the tables of every American dinner table.
Who sets the prices for that? What I mean is, even though I grew up surrounded by farms and have friends on farms, but I've never been on a farm. I mean, I've never worked on a farm. Who sets the prices if you have whether it's cattle, whether it's beef, or whether it's milk, but something that's comparable, right? I mean, two farms next to each other. Who decides how much? Like we had the same amount of cows we did last year, and we're milking and producing the same amount as we did last year.
Yep.
And somebody just come and pick it up. Who are the people that come and pick it up? And who sets it? Is it the farmers themselves saying, well, if you want my milk, it's going to cost you this much? Are they the ones that set the price?
No, and that's part of the issue. So it's a really good question. The old saying is that farmers are price takers, not price makers. And what that means is farmers are most of the crops that they're sold are on the commodity markets, which is like there's the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, for example. It's kind of like the New York Stock Exchange for Midwestern ag products. There's different exchanges across the world that set different prices. But a commodity is when you're growing corn that's the same in Iowa as it is in Wisconsin. The Iowa people don't like me saying that. They like to think their corn's special. But the field corn in Iowa and in Wisconsin, all that, it's a commodity. And so you're selling it on an open market across the country or across the globe, and that price is getting set by those commodity markets, those trades that are going on. If you have a farmer who's growing fresh local food that they're selling at a farmer's market, they might be selling some of it locally and able to set their price. They might be selling it to others online a little further away. They might be selling food into specialty food markets, all that kind of stuff. If that was a bigger part of the mix alongside of commodity crops, our farmers would have a little bit more ability, like other small businesses, to try to find a way, hey, what's the right price that people will buy my special, unique product at? But right now, farmers are kind of trapped into just taking the commodity price in a lot of cases. And that's at the same time that they're also price takers on the other side in terms of what their costs are. Seed, feed, fertilizer, they don't control those costs either. So the farmer is kind of stuck in between
Yeah.
prices that are set by other people in both directions. And, there are other businesses that are like that, but it's not a good position to be in, because it's not saying, here's what I've got, what'll you pay for it? It's saying, here's what I've got, I hope I get something that covers my costs. And that's
Because
not
there's no other option. Right. I mean,
right,
you take whatever you can get.
right,
You just
right.
get thrown away.
Yep.
This is
Exactly.
election season is already kind of kicking off. A lot of people are announcing for campaigns locally, obviously governor's race and etc. What would you encourage people to ask candidates in their area that are running for office as it relates to farms? Because we tend to ask the same kinds of questions
Yep.
to our candidates that are running for office. But what questions from a farmer's perspective would you ask a candidate running for any office in the state?
Absolutely. I always encourage people to ask your politicians or the people knocking on doors, or walking in parades or whatever it is. Ask them, hey, what are you going to do? What's your platform going to do to create new economic opportunity for our farmers? Don't ask, do you support the farmer? Because the hand will go straight
Oh,
up,
right.
and they
Yeah.
got something they voted for, they got some sort of program they voted for,
Uh,
but, say, what are you doing to create new economic opportunity for our farmers? And if they have an idea on it, well, that's interesting. Talk to them about that. They might actually be onto something. Maybe they got their head on straight and they've been looking at this issue. And if they don't know, if you get that blank stare, explain to them how you buy your food now and how you'd like to buy your food. What you'd like to be able to do, how you'd like to be able to support the farmer if you could in your area, and help them see that connection between our farms and our food, because then they can start to figure out how to craft policies. And I think it'll lead them towards some of the things we're talking about today: technology revolution, markets that are fair to the little guy,
yeah.
finding ways for that new entrepreneur opportunity to connect with the needs that our hardworking families have for their food. Those are the things that questions like that will force politicians to think about.
Do you miss when this time of the year starts? The campaigns and the announcements, because you've been on campaigns, you've worked on campaigns, you've been in politics. Are there days that you miss it, and are there times like this you miss it, or is it actually times like this you're going, I'm so glad I'm not in that anymore?
Man, I know we're getting up on time. I could torture myself in front of everybody about this for a long time. The reality is that I you always have the bug. I mean, for me, the reason I got into it, is a chance to continue my writing career, get out of journalism and get into something else and try something new. But it was a chance to try to fight for where I was from. And so there's a thrill in fighting for, something you think can help people who are from where you're from. And that's what got me into it. And that's, anybody who's worked in it, I think for the most part, they have some kind of it running through their blood, and everybody's kind of in campaign rehab a little bit once you've gotten out of it, for that reason, because
Yeah,
there's just
yeah,
nothing like that adrenaline rush,
yeah,
of getting in
yeah.
the arena and trying to fight for something you think, especially if it's something you think can help people like where you're from, which is what I was trying to do. Now that said, it's punishing on your life. It's so hard to have a family. I'm still working quite a lot with our consulting work, and then my writing on the side as an additional business that I'm keeping busy, and I don't have any more time than I used to. But the campaigns can be so crushing in terms of not only the time they take, but what it puts you through and what it requires of you on a Sunday night at 9 p.m. When you'd like to be, making sure your little girl is sleeping soundly by then.
Yeah,
And
it is a
so,
little soul sucking. Just saying, just a
yeah, it
little
is.
bit.
So I miss it, but I'm glad to not be in the day to day of it anymore. And I also like being able to speak in an independent fashion about these issues that cut across all kinds of political boundaries. So I'm grateful for that opportunity to do that.
All right. We have a question here, and then we can wrap this up. This is from Emily, or our good friend Emily Gall. Does the free market actually apply to farmers? That's my core question from this discussion.
It doesn't, like it should. And what I mean by that is we do have a lot of government programs and requirements and subsidies and different things that are in place. And whether they were well intentioned or not, they impact the economic incentives that farmers have to do what they're doing. And so it changes everything. And as I mentioned, those programs, whether you like them or not, we could argue about every single program. We could say, this is a good one, this is a bad one. But we're not doing that. We've just got all these programs piled up. We don't know which are working, which are contradictory, which are being abused, all that. So the reality is that is the world that farmers operate in. However, the farmer doesn't sit here every day thinking, oh, how can I just, let the government take care of me? The farmer is trying to figure out, how can I grow something that can make enough money for my farm to continue to make it? And the government programs have not prevented our farms from disappearing. So farmers the free market has been impacted in huge ways by government programs that change the incentives farmers face. But farmers are still trying to say, hey, if I plant this in the spring, can I make enough money on it in the fall to keep my farm operating for the next year, for the next month, for the next generation? So there's reforms that we can take that can mean that, whatever level of government is needed is appropriate and allows farmers to make decisions that are based on what's going on in the market. But right now it's a big kind of mix. It's a big blend, and farmers are trying to navigate through it just like anybody else.
Brian, we've covered a lot of stuff. We're up against our time, but obviously, is there anything that you want to make sure we talked about that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
All I want to say is I just hope that, people know that the farm families out there are living real stories. Our family, the only difference between us and other farm families is we picked our head up from the work for just a little bit to tell the story. I'm lucky we did. My dad's about as tight-lipped and stalwart of a farmer as you're going to get. I didn't think he was gonna, and he did. And so our experience is not unique. So when you hear me out there talking about, what it took for us to survive the Depression, or the tragic farm accidents we went through, the economic upheaval, whatever it is, farm families all across Wisconsin, all across the country are living that. And I just hope that people know that that's a reason for hope. Like when you got people like my dad who stepped up to age 8 after my dad slipped off or my grandpa slipped off a corn crib, broke his back. There's families like that all across the country, people who have that kind of resilience. And, they're still holding on, even though we've made the economics not work for them in this country. So imagine what we could accomplish if the economics worked for them again, with all that resilience that, runs all through communities in Wisconsin and other parts of the country.
I know that that was one of my favorite parts about the book, or something I resonated with, was your stories and talking about your father and hearing about him. Because, our dads, like you and I, that generation, those dads, they don't make those anymore, right? And so I absolutely resonate with a lot of that, because I'm like, I could totally see my dad being that person as well, because he is that same kind of a person. Yep. But yeah, that was a great book, Land Rich, Cash Poor. People should check it out.
I appreciate it. We're out with our new paperback edition this fall, and you can find Land Rich, Cash Poor on Amazon, anywhere else you buy them online. Also, independent bookstores across Wisconsin, across the country. But what I really appreciate is anybody who just keeps the conversation going about these issues, because it's something we can solve, and it's so important for our home state too.
All right. Thanks, Brosinger.
Good to be with you, sir.
We'll do it again soon. A special thank you to award-winning author and rural policy expert Brian Reisinger for taking the time to come on for a chat today. I'll see you all back here this Thursday, November 6th at 8:30 a.m. when North of 8 Design and Marketing founder, speaking of, Emily Gall, will join me once again for our latest episode of That's Debatable. So until then, for DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden saying thank you for watching, and as always, have a blessed day.